Hello and welcome to Law Matters. My name is Michael Conroy, and I will be your host as we explore various legal topics that impact the lives of many of us or our friends or families on a daily basis. I am a partner at Hassett George, a full-service law firm with offices in Simsbury and Glastonbury. I've been in practice for 27 years, and my practice is concentrated primarily in the area of civil litigation, handling such matters as personal injury and insurance coverage disputes. On this program, we hope to bring you information that is eye-opening and informative regarding areas of the law that touch many of our lives, but about which there are common misconceptions. Please remember that this program is informational and is not a substitute for legal advice regarding your particular situation. Each individual case is unique, and while we hope to inform and educate you regarding general legal issues, I cannot urge you enough to seek competent legal representation if you are presented with a legal problem. Your rights and financial well-being could depend on it. We welcome your feedback regarding the show. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, or if you would like to request topics to be covered on future episodes, please email us at lawmatters@hgesq.com. Today's topic will be home improvement contracts. We'll cover what you should know before hiring a home improvement contractor and what to do if you end up in a dispute with a contractor during your construction or remodel. My guests today will be Matt Beizer and Jared Alfin. Matt Beizer is a Senior Assistant Attorney General for the state of Connecticut in the Public Safety Department. He has been with the AG's office since 1995 and currently heads up the AGO Home Improvement Unit, which criminally prosecutes cases against home improvement contractors and new home construction contractors. Since its inception, the AGO Home Improvement Unit has prosecuted hundreds of contractors and has recovered millions of dollars in restitution for Connecticut consumers. Often, this restitution is recovered through the State Home Improvement Contractors Guarantee Fund, which is a fund maintained by the Department of Consumer Protection for the benefit of Connecticut consumers. Matt and his wife live in Simsbury, where they have raised their children. Jared Alfin is a partner at Hassett George. He's been practicing for 19 years, concentrating in the area of civil litigation. Jared represents small businesses, entrepreneurs, and individuals in various types of litigation. He especially enjoys counseling people through business disputes and has been involved in many cases involving homeowners and home improvement contractors. Jared lives in Burlington with his family. Thank you both for being here. Let's get started. I'd like to begin by talking about how a homeowner should go about selecting a contractor. So Matt, how do you start the process? What's the best way to find a contractor?
Well, Mike, first of all, thank you for having me today. The issue of starting the process for finding a contractor is obviously a very important issue. Our office, the Attorney General's office, has handled hundreds, perhaps even thousands of disputed claims between contractors and consumers in these type cases. And we haven't done any sort of empirical studies or definitive statistical information, but I can say from experience, without question, the single best way for a consumer to find a contractor is through a personal referral, whether it's from a neighbor or a friend or someone in a neighborhood group or something like that, a personal referral from someone who has had actual experience with that contractor doing work at their job. And the reason that that's critical is we're going to talk later in this program about the due diligence that a consumer should do before signing up with a contractor. And one of the check boxes, so to speak, for that due diligence is to ask for and follow up on referrals, job referrals from the contractor. That's a critical part of the due diligence. Like I said, we'll talk about that later in the program. But if a consumer can find a contractor, as I said, through a friend, through a neighbor, through someone in a community group who's done work with that contractor and can vouch for or criticize that contractor, then in effect, the consumer is checking off the box, the due diligence box in terms of a referral from someone who has personal experience with that job. So that'd be my recommendation, is a personal referral. As you get away from the more personal referrals, my experience from the cases I've handled is you get more and more problematic cases. For example, if you just punch in roofing contractor Simsbury on the internet, you're going to run into these companies, Angie's List, those type companies that I found. My experience with the Attorney General's office is you have more problematic incidents with these type companies as the source of referral because there's no personal investment. Angie's has a business model, and these companies, I believe, have a business model where they just want to sign the contractor up with the consumer, and they get a piece of that money. They have no incentive to be critical or to give you the skinny, so to speak, on the contractor, how good that contractor is. Presumably, if you talk to a friend or a neighbor or someone from a community group who's done work with that contractor, they're going to give you an honest and upfront appraisal of that contractor and the contractor's work. So, in sum, my recommendation would be as personal a referral as possible in terms of finding a contractor.
Good. So, Jared, can you tell us what due diligence a homeowner should do when looking for a contractor?
Sure.
In addition to talking to direct personal referrals.
Sure, and thanks for having me again.
Sure.
So part of the due diligence process that you want to go through is making sure that you have more than just one quote from one contractor. You want to get at least 3. You want to make sure these contractors are all in the same exact field of expertise. You don't want to hire a plumber for an electrical job and vice versa, a roofer for an electrical job. So you really want to make sure you have 3 guys, gals, whatever you want, in the same field. You also want to make sure that you're comparing specifically apples and apples, not apples and oranges. So when you go through their quote and they provide you what you're going to do, make sure you go through the scope of what your project entails. It's very important that you're looking to say, okay, this contractor is going to do the same exact thing. What did they come in at? What is their price? What do they have material prices at? And you really want to analyze what you're getting as part of your due diligence. Another thing you want to do is very important is make sure you look up the contractor with the state in terms of whether they're licensed or not. As we'll talk about more later in detail, there's only certain remedies that you can have if they're licensed. If they're not licensed, you may be out of some of your remedies, specifically as you referenced earlier with the Home Improvement Guarantee Fund. So making sure your contractor is in fact licensed is a very big component of that. And that can be done with a very simple online check. And pretty much every home improvement contractor should have a home improvement license, and it should be on the front of their contract. So aside from doing the due diligence of selecting quotes and making sure that everyone is essentially having the same type of quote, making sure that they're licensed, but also looking at what the quotes may differ. You may have a contractor that gives you that you think is the same project, and they may be adding certain things that you never thought about, and you may want to, as part of your due diligence, say, well, contractor A has these 5 things that they're doing for this dollar amount. I don't see that on contractor B and C's quote. Why not? Follow up and ask. And then when you're getting these quotes, ask them each for references. The most important thing is getting references from these types of contractors, because you want to know, did they mess up a job in the past? Did somebody else be very unhappy with them? Or did they do a great job? So following up and making sure that each of these, that they have references that they can give, and calling all of them and asking them questions about the job. How long did the job take? Did it take longer than expected? Did they ask you for payment up front? Were they on top of you for payments? How did the job go? Did they do a good job? Or are you satisfied? Did things break? How did they handle situations where they didn't complete? Maybe they weren't on time doing certain things. Were they still demanding payments? The whole process is very important. It's your home, and you want to make sure that when you are paying this kind of money to do a job, you're getting what you paid for. And sometimes you don't always get that.
Yeah, to add a couple points on the due diligence, those are all excellent points. And to elaborate on, Attorney Alfin recommends checking job references. And what we run into quite frequently is contractors who have done good work, whether it's 4, 5, 6 years ago, sometimes even for the same consumer. And then in 4 or 5 years later, they have problems, and whether it's personal problems or whatever, the contractor will do a bad job, and they'll have cases that end up in our office. So my recommendation in regard to checking the referrals would be check recent jobs that, actually talk to the last job that they've done or the 2 jobs back that they've done, not someone who's on a reference list from 5 years ago, because circumstances change in the contractors' lives that often have a significant impact on the consumer. Second point, again, to elaborate on the importance of checking the registration. It's very easy at the the Department of Consumer Protection maintains a database of all registered contractors in the state, and it's state law that all contractors have to be registered. It's actually a criminal law. It's what our office primarily prosecutes, is contractors who have not been registered. So it's very easy for a consumer, as Attorney Alfin says, the importance of checking, but it's very easy to do simply by going to the Department of Consumer Protection website. There's a drop-down for license lookup, and there's another drop-down for home improvement registration. So with 2 or 3 clicks, you can verify that your contractor is registered. And it's important, number one, to show that your contractor is in compliance with the law. You want to deal with a contractor who recognizes the importance of being in compliance with the law. And it's also important because as discussed, it allows you access in a lot of cases to a home improvement guarantee fund. That's a fund maintained by the Department of Consumer Protection for the benefit of consumers. If your contractor is registered, then in some cases, which we'll discuss, you have access to this home improvement guarantee fund.
Great. Yeah, and I've taken a look at that website, and for people watching at home, it's real easy to find. All you have to do is search Connecticut license lookup, and it pops right up on your screen. And then you're able to plug in either an individual's name or a business name, and it will show you if they have a license or if maybe they have one that was expired. And what can be important, what type of license, because if you're hiring someone to do a large project and all they have is a plumber's license, that may not be the right outfit for you to retain for that job. That's all good stuff. Now, we've been talking about due diligence to find a contractor. So you found a contractor and you're about to enter into a contract for them to do a job. What should be in that contract?
Sure. So one of the first things you want to look at is right off the bat, as we discussed, is the contractor license. Now, the license should be on the contract under Connecticut state law, along with the contractor's name and address. Another important part of the contract is to have a start date, an end date, and a 3-day rescission period, so that if you're getting cold feet, you got some issues, you can cancel the contract. The contract also has to be signed, of course. And this is all very important, just the basics. You also want to make sure, as part of the contract, the scope of work is in there, and you don't just want to have a contract that says remodel basement or remodel kitchen. You really want to make sure that you have the scope of the job itemized in there. You want to make sure the when the payments are due is in there. You don't want to leave a lot of things up in the air where the contractor can go back and say, well, you owe me this, you owe me that, and you go look in the contract and it doesn't say anything. So you want to make sure everything is really spelled out for purposes of the contract, which we can get into in more detail. But those are the main things that you want to be taking a look at.
Now, most of these elements that you've just listed off for us, these are required by statute, right?
Yes, by statute, the contractor is required to have a start date, an end date. He's required to have his home improvement license on the contract with his address, and he's also required to have the 3-day rescission period in there for you to see, just sign if you're not interested in doing the job. There's some other minor things about affiliations with LLC, with what companies affiliated with, and so forth. But those are the main things that you really want to be looking out for.
And to build on that, those are exactly the points that are required by statute. But in terms of the registration number that's listed on the contract, this is the perfect thing to punch into the DCP website, because I would estimate in the hundreds of cases that our office has handled, probably 25% of the actual numbers, HIC registration numbers that are listed on the contracts are either inactive or there's somebody else's contract registration number, which is a criminal violation itself. So if a consumer is dealing with a contractor, you get the contract with all the specified terms as Attorney Alfin laid out, and you have a registration number, just punch that into the DCP website and make sure that it's registered to that particular person and that it's active.
Right. Good stuff.
And if you're not sure if the member or the person who's your contractor that you're dealing with is in fact the owner of this particular company, there's a way that you can go on the Secretary of State website and you can pull up the name of the LLC, and you can open that up and you can very easily click on two buttons and say, okay, here's who the members are, the owners are, and you can make sure that you're actually dealing with John Smith Contractor comes to your house, and that's in fact John Smith, who's the owner of the home improvement company that you're dealing with. It's very important, so that way somebody doesn't just come in with, oh yeah, I work for this company and they here's my contract, and you can make sure that you are in fact dealing with somebody legitimate as opposed to someone who's just using somebody else's license and name, which could be obviously a significant fraud.
Right. And if you're dealing with a corporate entity, an LLC or a corporation, those records will be on there to let you know, A, does it exist? B, is it still in business? And as you listed, who the actual principals of the entity are. And that's another website that for people at home is really easy to find. You don't even have to know the address. You can just run a search for Connecticut business records, and that will pop up, and it gives you search boxes to plug in individual names or business names, and then you can find all that information. So what happens? You've hired a contractor. What happens if the contractor is not abiding by that contract, or they're not being responsive or doing the job that you expected them to do? What avenues does a homeowner have available to themselves to pursue some sort of remedy?
I would defer largely to Attorney Alfin to answer this, because it doesn't pertain exactly to what we do at the Attorney General's office. But I would say, generally, again, from having dealt with all these cases over the years, my experience is that we never see a case where the consumer is not ahead of the contractor in terms of money paid. It's always the situation that the consumer gets talked into or just pays some sort of money that gets the contractor ahead of the consumer in terms of money. And that's obviously problematic. If you pay somebody $20,000 and they've done no work, you have a big issue. If you haven't paid them any money at that point, you don't have so big an issue. So that's the primary observation I make from the cases I've handled. As far as the strategy, when you're in that situation, I defer to Attorney.
Yeah, so one of the ways to sort of avoid that is, as Attorney Beizer was saying, is the way you structure the contract. If you have the way you make your payments, if you're going to make a huge payment up front, that should be a little bit of a red flag that the contractor is trying to get all your money up front so that he makes sure that he's way ahead of you. So at the end of the job, if he's not done the right thing, he's fallen behind, he's not really out as much money as he would be had he or she done periodic payments. One of the recommendations is to do payments based upon items of completion and inspection. And once they finish, installing a cabinet, you pay for you pay an upfront amount for that to get that far, and then there's another set of phases of completion which the contractor gets paid for. That sort of helps solve the problem of the contractor getting too far ahead of the homeowner. But in terms of what happens when the problem arises, you immediately have to stop, and you have to just shut the job down and talk to the contractor and have a real discussion about where are you in the contract, what's gone wrong, what's not working. And at that point in time, what I always do recommend to clients is, as much as you don't want to engage a lawyer and you don't want to file a lawsuit, you don't have to. You pick up the phone, you call a lawyer, and you get some advice about where you are in the contract and what should happen. The lawyer may say to you, you are too deep into this, and I see several problems happen down the road. This is not a situation you can fix. However, there are times where you're not too bad, and you can work with the contractor, say, okay, well, we've fallen behind. Let's restructure this agreement to make sure that you catch up. And here's how we're going to restructure it. And here's what needs to be fixed. And you give deadlines and times to complete the fixes. And if the contractor is not able to do that quick fix in a certain period of time to your liking and to what's done right, I think it's then time to start talking about hiring a new contractor, getting somebody else in there to inspect the work and just determine whether the contractor is doing what they're supposed to be doing, or B, this whole job is going to be an F at the end of the day, and you might as well tell this contractor, thank you, goodbye, and talk about what needs to get done to finish the rest of the job. But I do think engaging counsel early on when that happens and getting another contractor to come in there to at least be the second hand looking at the other contractor's job is very important, because it will give you ideas as to what you're not seeing, because most likely homeowners are not, they're not contractors. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're looking at. And what may look like a perfectly installed kitchen faucet could be a windfall of a waterfall in a week to come. So you want to really make sure that you're on top of these things, and you're not letting a contractor get to the end of the job before you actually start looking at everything along the way. And one more thing I would say to that is, a lot of times people like have a contractor come over, they're not around, they say, okay, here are the keys to the house, get the job done. You got to be on top of the contractor. You got to be watching what they're doing. If the contractor doesn't see that you're on top of them, shortcuts get taken, unfortunately, and you could be in a situation where a week or two lakes down the road, there's a problem, and the contractor's nowhere to be found and won't be returning your phone calls. So there's things that you can do to really sort of protect yourself, and those are the types of things that I recommend.
And I would add, those are all excellent points. And to elaborate on one of the points, if the consumer engages the contractor in discussions about the level of performance, and perhaps arrives at a new schedule for completion of things, or if there's some interaction, my recommendation from handling the cases I've handled is that the consumers should put as much in writing as possible, because just to have a personal conversation with a contractor 2 years later when we're prosecuting a case, or when you guys are civilly handling a case, you don't really have any evidence at all. But if you have text exchanges or email exchanges, that is concrete evidence of what you agreed to, what you didn't agree to, that type of thing. So my recommendation is, if you engage in this continued negotiation or renegotiation of the contract or anything in that regard, I would suggest that it be in writing of some sort.
That's a great point.
Great point. Documentation is key. So guys, tell us more about this home improvement guarantee fund that's been mentioned. Can a contractor be held criminally liable for messing up a job?
Yes, and that is, as I said earlier, that's primarily the cases that our office prosecutes. There's a criminal statute that obligates a contractor to be registered with the Department of Consumer Protection prior to doing home improvements. It's actually it's a Class B misdemeanor, which carries up to 6 months in prison. I mean, we've done a number of trials, and we've actually incarcerated home improvement contractors who repeatedly violated this statute. So yes, it's a serious statute, and yes, contractors are prosecuted, and yes, contractors sometimes face serious penalties as a result. The way the guarantee fund works is when the contractors are required to register. When they're registered with the Department of Consumer Protection, they're required to pay a fee, and then there's an annual fee for renewal. I believe it's $190 now. So Department of Consumer Protection takes that registration. Number one, they maintain that database that we discussed about registered home improvement contractors. Number two, they take the large part of that fee that's paid to them for the home improvement registrations, and they put it into this home improvement guarantee fund. That's a fund that's maintained by Department of Consumer Protection for the benefit of consumers who have had bad or problematic transactions with contractors. And so there's this large fund out there, and it has a lot of money in it. I've seen the paperwork on it, and it's a large fund that's out there that's available to consumers who have bad interactions with contractors. So how does the consumer get into that fund? The way they get access to that fund is you have to get a judicial decree of any sort, whether it's a small claims judgment, a judgment that would come out of a superior court action sometimes bought by attorney, sometimes bought pro se by the consumer. They can get a criminal restitution order, which is what we do in our cases. You can sometimes get an arbitration award. Any sort of judicial decree that this contractor owes you money, the consumer then takes that directly to Department of Consumer Protection, directly to the Home Improvement Guarantee Fund, and says, look, I have this judicial decree. please pay it. And the way the fund works is the fund pays that automatically up to $25,000. In the advantage, the great benefit of that fund is the consumer does not have to chase, so to speak, the contractor to get a payment on some sort of award. Anyone who's dealt with civil litigation and knows that when you get a restitution order against anybody, whether it be a contractor or anyone on the civil side, there's that next step of then trying to recover on that. And the Home Improvement Guarantee Fund takes that step out of the equation. You get your judicial decree, you present it to the fund then pays you directly, and then the fund actually will chase or pursue reimbursement from the contractor for the money that's paid out on their behalf. And DCP also, if someone is constantly getting home improvement guarantee funds paid out because of their faulty experience with contractors, with consumers, the Department of Consumer Protection will no longer register that contractor going forward, which would be problematic for the reasons that we've discussed.
Great. All right, gentlemen, this has been great. Very informative. We're out of time for today. We hope you found the show helpful and informative. Doing your homework before hiring a contractor can help avoid problems down the road. And knowing your options can help ease the pain of those problems that do arise. Again, this program is intended for informational purposes and is not a substitute for legal advice regarding your particular situation. Each individual case is unique, and while we hope to inform and educate you regarding general legal issues, I cannot urge you strongly enough to seek competent legal representation if you are presented with a legal problem. Your rights and financial well-being could depend on it. From all of us at Law Matters, thanks for watching, and please tune in next time.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.